Hey there, it's Brian Goulet here of GouletPens.com, and I'm here for my 56th episode of Goulet Q&A on November 7th of 2014. Thanks for joining me this week. I had kind of a crazy week last week because I ended up doing the Q&A on a Thursday instead of a Friday. I think that might be the first time I've ever done that. I can't remember. Maybe a nice little trivia question there. But, anyway, so the reason that I did that is because, well, as you probably well know now, we announced on Friday of last week that we are going to be launching a new GouletPens.com website. Don't have a specific day for you yet because we're still working out some bugs. We want this thing to be as clean and polished as we can possibly realistically get it before we launch. So it will be very soon though. We've been working on this thing for a year and a half, and it has now finally come to the point where, okay, we're ready to actually start talking about it. So it's going to be really cool, and I know it's kind of interesting, like some of the comments that we got on the blog post were, really positive. Some of them were like, yeah, why are you changing this, and like, why are you rebranding and all this kind of thing. And so I think there's some confusion maybe about that. There's going to be a little bit of rebranding, but it's going to be very light. It's going to be a very, very similar kind of feel. A lot of it's just going to be enhancements. We're kind of cleaning up some things, polishing some things, enhancing the navigation quite a bit. Photography is phenomenal, so it's going to be really exciting once it launches. So you just have to trust me. Just trust me that it's going to be good, okay? But thank you all for your supportive comments that you've had there. That's been really great. In addition to that, we kind of, had some bad news in that we have to postpone ink drop from November into December. So, normally we were planning on, we already suspended it for October. Now we are suspending it for November as well. And we hate to do that. We were shooting to get the website launched before November so that we wouldn't have to do that. Unfortunately, we missed our mark by just a little bit, so we are not going to be able to do ink drop in November. And it kind of kills me that we have to do that, but what we decided to do to make up for it was not only are we going to have a bang-in ink drop in December to incentivize you to kind of come back on board, but we are also doing an ink sample palooza for the month of November at GouletPens.com, 20% off ink samples, and it has been received quite well indeed. So that's pretty exciting. So, especially because it's just it's something that we can kind of do to just make up for the bad news that we had with the ink drop there. So thank you for being open and flexible on that. And then followed that right up, bam, the next day on Saturday with this Thanksgiveaway, which we did last year. We're doing a very similar kind of thing this year. Jenny and Sarah and really about 10 people on our team helped put that video together. It's a really cool stop motion. I recommend you check it out. And if you haven't seen it yet, or maybe if you have but you didn't look that closely, look in there. We got some special pens in there, some old limited editions, some old premieres. We tried to put some kind of special pens in there. I even put the first pen that I ever returned. So technically the first pen that was ever handled by the Goulet Pen Company is in that video as well. So kind of neat. It is a ballpoint, but that's okay. I didn't know back then, right? It's okay. And then I feel really bad because last week I, in the Q&A, I talked about this celluloid Delta Unica. I got you all excited about that. I was planning on doing a video to come out with that, talk all about celluloid, what's the difference between celluloid and resin and all this kind of stuff, which I do actually have as a question here. But, after I shot the video that day, the Q&A, and it went up, we launched the pens and they started selling really well, and I was talking to the folks at Delta and I was like, oh man, this pen's really successful. Can I go ahead and order more? I want to make sure I'm well stocked through the holiday season. And they said, yeah, we're not going to be able to make you anymore. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? They said, yeah, because this celluloid that they use in that pen, that's the same celluloid they use for a bunch of other pens, including their Delta Vita, which is like their flagship pen. And they said it takes about 2 years. 2 years to prepare that celluloid. It's a very extensive process. I'll get all into what makes celluloid so special here in a second, but basically they're low on the stock right now. They don't want to have that stuff just flying out the door on that Unica when they need to be using it for other pens. So unfortunately that pen is essentially gone. Literally it's gone. Like it's gone from our site now. It was gone on Thursday. So it is no more. So that pen really was kind of too good to be true, even though I didn't know that going into it. I didn't know that it would be that limited, but it is what it is. We had 100 pens and they are gone gone, gone, gone. So that was kind of too good to be true. But we are going to carry the regular ones. There's a white one that we're not going to carry. If you're really interested in the white, we can special order it. But we're going to carry the blue and the pink one. Really kind of neat color. So once I handled the Unica, I was like, this is actually kind of a cool pen. So it's going to be a resin version in the blue and the pink. So we'll have that in a week or a week and a half, something like that. So that's kind of neat. I also got the Stipula splashes in. I know I've been getting some requests to do a video on that. I'm working on it, but we've just got so much stuff going on right now. I'm having to really kind of prioritize things, especially with the website launch. Like, we're really trying to keep that ball moving. So, just please be patient with me on some of this stuff that I know you're really interested in. And then we also, this week, on Wednesday, announced a Monteverde ink promotion. So basically, we are going to be giving away a bottle of Monteverde ink with every Monteverde pen that sells now through the end of the year. And if you are ordering a Paquito or a Tool pen, which is a cartridge-only pen, we'll include a pack of black cartridges with you there. So the bottled ink, you get your choice of color. The cartridges, you only get black, because that's all we have. So it's a nice little promotion there. If you were looking at getting a Monteverde pen anyway, it's an extra little bump for you. So that's kind of cool. And then we have the Noodler's Neponsets, which have just arrived. We decided, because there's so much demand for them, that we're doing a timed release, which we haven't done in probably a year and a half, since like we got acrylic Conrads when they first came out, or maybe some ebonite Conrads or something. I don't remember. It was a while ago. Most of our team here hasn't even been involved in a timed release, so we're having to kind of teach everybody what the process is for that. So it will be kind of interesting. I did a blog post on that, 2 days ago, and I'm actually recording this now at like 11 o'clock on Thursday, so we have like 2 hours to go in real world time before the Neponsets actually release. I'm making a prediction now, but by the time this video publishes, all of the Neponsets will be gone. I'm calling it right now. I think that they're going to be gone. So we got an okay stock of them, but this pen has been in development for 4 years, and it's just so hyped up, and there's so many people that want to try this thing that it's just, I know that there's not enough supply to meet the demand. So I don't know when we're going to be getting more. It could be a couple of weeks, it could be a year. I honestly just don't know. It all depends on what kind of supply that Nathan is working out, what's going on with all the other pens. He's making all the Noodler's ink. He's coordinating the manufacture now of 4 or 5 different pen models. It's pretty crazy the amount of work that he does to bring these Noodler's products to the world. So, be patient. Please be patient. It's just, it's a great pen, but you're not going to die if you don't get this pen. It's okay. So we're doing a timed release, or did, I guess, a timed release. I'm hoping now that I can say that everything was flawless and successful, but I know that there's going to be some upset people, and we try to do our best to mitigate that kind of situation when we're in such a over-demanded kind of product situation. But this is the best way that we know to manage it, so hopefully that all goes well there. And then we got a couple of new things that are coming in. TWSBI announced their 580 in red, and green, not red and green, but red and a green. Those are going to be coming out pretty soon, so we'll have those in the next week and a half, something like that. So that's kind of cool. This is a pen that they were planning to come out with last year for Christmas time, and then got pushed back a bit. Understandably, it kind of happens with pretty much everybody. And so we are going to be getting them now before Christmas time, which is good. And then we will have them. So we're getting pretty decent stock, but it's also a TWSBI, and we tend to run out of those things too. So if you are interested in that, wouldn't be a terrible idea to move on that sooner than later. I know this is just like a crazy time, and if you are tight on the wallet, you are probably just dying right now, because it's like there are just so many cool things coming out right now. We launched the Ogivas this week too, the Omas Ogiva Albas. Got a really comprehensive video on that. I put so much time and effort into that, and still working out some of the finer details. I tried to cover so much things that I'm still kind of correcting some of the finer things that I said in there, and that's okay. I'm going back and fixing what I can, but check that video out. It's long, but it's really comprehensive, and it helps to give you an idea of what makes a pen worth $500. And it's definitely not the pen for everybody, but it is kind of neat at least to see the level of depth and kind of thought and history that goes into a pen like that. So that's kind of neat. But anyway, that's kind of the update of what's been going on with me. So let's go ahead and get into the questions for this week, because I got a bunch of them. Definitely got more questions than I can answer in one shot. That is par for the course these days, but I got a bunch that I think will be of interest, so thank you for everybody to ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer as many of them as I can. Okay, Dane Miles on YouTube said, question on the Delta Unica, what's the big deal about celluloid? Is there something better about it? Okay, I'm glad you asked this question, because I was planning on shooting a Delta Unica video that covered all about celluloid and stuff, because I had grand visions of like, this is a pen, a sub $100 celluloid pen. This is like the celluloid pen for the people, like this has never been done, and I was all excited about it. And then when Delta told me, hey, we just can't make this happen, I was like, there you go. So there's a reason why you can't get sub $100 celluloid pens. It's just too much. So basically, here's what's going on with celluloid. Okay, so I'm not like a huge like vintage buff, so I'm gonna give kind of broad dates. I'm not gonna give you very specific things because I'm not a full like historian here. So there's some good information out there on websites. You know, Richard Binder's website has a lot of good historical information about just fountain pens in general. There's a lot of other good places like Fountain Pen Network and stuff that have good historical kind of resources for vintage pens. That is not my forte, so forgive me if some of my facts are a little bit off. But basically, my understanding of it is that, you know, around the turn of the 20th century, you know, early 1900s, fountain pens were just starting to become kind of a thing, right? Everybody was kind of getting away from dip pens, and they wanted these portable pens with ink reservoirs in them. That was a big concept back then. A lot of them were ebonite, because ebonite was a hard rubber material, natural material, that you could actually, you know, shape and use like a rubber bladder or a sack or something like that, and carry that ink in your pen. That was a major concept that I think Conklin came out with first. I could be wrong on that. And so the, where am I going with this? I'm getting mesmerized by my ooze tube here. So basically that was a concept around the early 1900s, was you had these ebonite pens, and so they were kind of looking for other types of materials to be making things out of. Modern plastics were not around back then, so they were looking for other things. There was a natural process and kind of a natural material that they derived that had some plastic-like qualities, okay, and it was called celluloid. Basically, celluloid is a type of resin, if you want to call it that, that is derived from the cell walls of wood fibers. Okay, so because of that, it is a natural material, so it can expand and breathe and move just like wood can to a degree. Not quite the same, but to a degree. And it's very hazardous to work with. It's very flammable in the manufacturing process. Kind of toxic in terms of how you actually kind of harvest the cell walls and stuff like that. Some of the chemicals used and whatnot. So it's a really kind of an interesting process to actually make the stuff. But if you look way back at some of the old vintage pens, you can see there's some really kind of unique materials that started to come out of those celluloids that were very different than just kind of this flat kind of rubber look that the ebonites had. So that was kind of the earliest kind of plastics that as they were kind of coming out, and then later on, I don't know exactly when. I really need to brush up on my history here with the pen materials, but once, you know, acrylic resins and stuff like that started to come out, they largely replaced a lot of celluloids because they were much faster to produce, they were much less expensive, much less hazardous to work with, and much easier to shape, and then you got into injection molding, and that really changed things too. So, you know, basically what happened was celluloids started to just really kind of stay in like the expensive kind of upper echelon pens because of how hard it is to manufacture. And so you're asking me, what's the big deal about it? Like, why would you get something more expensive, more harder to work with, all that kind of stuff? What's the benefit? Okay, over a plastic pen. Okay, I think that's, you know, acrylic resin is plastic. It's a type of plastic. So what's the big deal over plastic versus celluloid? So celluloid, because it's kind of derived from a natural material, it has some benefits to it that plastic doesn't have. It's very durable. So plastic is more brittle. So plastic has more of a tendency to chip and crack and scratch than celluloid does. The materials look fairly similar just at first glance, but over time, it's going to hold up a little better than acrylic. Acrylic still is pretty good in that respect, but it will be better. And it specifically with scratches, it has kind of almost like a self-polishing quality to it. You'll get some fine scratches just from tossing the pen around and using it and capping and recapping and stuff like that. But as your fingers kind of move on the material, it'll actually kind of rub out some of those finer scratches, you know, because the material is a little more flexible. Flexible sounds really bad, but you know what I mean. It's not as brittle. And some other benefits, it feels kind of warm to the touch. And part of that is because it is kind of a natural material, so it will absorb some of the oils in your fingers. So when you're writing with it, especially for a long period of time, it is not going to slip around. You know, you're not going to have to grip it as hard to keep that kind of firm grip on the pen. So that means that your hand can be more relaxed, and when you're writing for longer periods, you're going to have less hand cramping. You're going to have a more relaxed kind of situation going on with your hand as you're writing than you would over an acrylic pen. Or especially, you can notice a big difference if you're using a metal pen, like a pen with a slick metal grip. If you've ever used one of those, that feels really cool, really kind of cold. And then as you're writing with it, you know, your fingers will warm up the metal, but then your oils will build up and that pen will get really hard to kind of grip. That's one reason I kind of don't like some of the metal pens for longer writing sessions. Things like the Monteverde Artistic Crystal, the Lamy Studio, you know, these are some nice pens that I sell and I enjoy, but I do not like writing with them for long. They're okay for quick notes, but not for long writing sessions, not for me anyway. So I like, you know, materials that are not quite like that. So acrylic is a big step over a metal grip pen, but then celluloid kind of even takes it a little bit further. Those are some of the main benefits. And then, yeah, and it just kind of looks nice. They can do some things with the celluloids that they can't really do with acrylics quite as much. Some unique colors and stuff like that, especially if you look at some of the vintage stuff. There's some things. I don't understand fully, like chemically, what it is with that, but that's about it. So it takes a long time to produce. It takes about 1 or 2 years to actually cure and kind of stabilize because it is such a movable natural material. You know, just like you have wood, you know, I don't know, I've got a bit of a woodworking background, so I know, you know, when you're working with wood, when you're building furniture and things like that, you know, for example, if you have desk drawers, you know, the bottom of your desk drawer will always be floating. It might be like glued or pinned at one point, but because the wood expands and contracts with moisture, especially in the summer versus the winter, you have to account for the movement of the wood. So when you're constructing wood furniture, wood things like that, you always have to take into account when you're joining things, when you are, you know, inlaying certain things about wood movement. And that's why when you see certain older things when they're constructed, you'll see they're split at certain joints and stuff like that, just because over time it's shrunken and expanded so many times. You know, so it helps to stabilize those kind of things. If you made the celluloid into a pen too soon, it would not be stable enough. It would still be moving a lot, and then you would end up with cracking and things like that. So you have to stabilize it and cure it over a very long period of time. So you got to like put it into an oven, bake it for a month or two, and then take it out and let it stabilize. Bake it again, let it stabilize. Bake it again, let it stabilize. And you're doing this process over and over again until you have the thing stable enough where it's not moving anymore. And so that's why it takes such an incredibly long process. So it's definitely not the kind of thing that everybody's going to really be able to tell the difference. You know, it's kind of like, it's like anything really. It's like golf clubs or a nice camera or whatever. You know, if you are just getting into the hobby and you don't have that discernible taste, or like a fine wine, you know, it's like you can't tell the difference with these really expensive materials until you've really been using a lot, and then you have kind of a very kind of a fine-tuned palette, I guess, finger palette, if that makes any sense. That doesn't make sense. I'll just say that right now, but that's what I'm calling it. So your fingers have to be able to tell the difference between the touch on the different materials. Then you can tell the difference with the celluloids. So it's something that I haven't in the past really had a lot of experience with celluloids and things, and I've been kind of like, I don't really know, and I haven't really researched them all that much. Then I really started to get into them now, kind of with this relationship that I'm building with Omas, and then with Delta coming out with this celluloid, it has really kind of exposed me to some of these alternate kind of natural materials like the cotton resin in the Omases. Omas does a lot of celluloid as well. Delta does a celluloid, so I'm getting a little bit more familiar with that, and I'm kind of happy to share that information with you as I kind of learn on this little journey about these materials. I know if you're like a really big vintage pen buff and you've been into pens for 30, 40, 50 years, some of this stuff might be like old hat to you, but for a lot of people that are new in the fountain pen world, I know that this is some really kind of interesting information. And I definitely come from that camp. I didn't grow up with fountain pens. So for me, even though I'm in this world and I've been doing this for 5 years, I still haven't had a lot of experience with celluloids. So I'm still learning myself. So that said, if there's anything that I say that's kind of wrong or off a little bit, or my dates are screwed up, let me know. I'm more than happy to kind of own up to the fact that I don't know everything about this, but I am going to kind of share it with you as I learn. Just like that's pretty much what I've been doing all along over the last 5 years. I started shooting videos when I really didn't know all that much, but I try to learn as much as I can to prepare it for you, and then I'm always kind of keeping the conversation going, tweaking, learning, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of cool. So anyway, one point I did want to bring out about celluloid, because it is more of a natural material, it is kind of stabilized and stuff, so it's definitely up to handling fountain pen ink, but generally speaking, you don't want to use celluloid as like an eyedropper converted pen because it is more prone to staining. If ink just kind of gets on the pen and you wipe it off, it's not a big deal, but if you're leaving it in the pen for like months at a time, it's going to stain more than acrylic would because it is kind of a porous material. That's just kind of how it is. Next question. That was a long one. This one's going to be shorter. Mitchell C. on Facebook. I just started getting into fountain pens, and I was wondering if it's possible to fill a standard international converter by just dipping the converter in the ink bottle instead of dipping the entire tip of the pen in the ink bottle. Absolutely, Mitchell. By all means, fill it however you want. You don't even have to do that. If you have an ink syringe, you could do that. Do I have an ink syringe right here that I can show? Nope. Thought I had one. That's all right. It's just a blunt tip syringe. You can fill the converter directly with a syringe, and you don't even have to unscrew the converter if you don't want to. That's a way to do it. So really, you're just trying to get the ink into that pen. That's the only thing. The benefit of doing what you're describing here, with you taking the converter off and filling it, is the nibs of most fountain pens. And I'm looking around trying to find one. Okay, here we go. So the nib of most fountain pens is fairly long, right? And where fountain pens fill from most of the time is, not on every single pen, but most of them, fill right here where the feed fits into the grip of the pen, right on the backside there. So if you have a bottle of ink that has less than that amount of ink in there, probably a half inch or so of ink in the bottom of the bottle, you're going to have a hard time filling that pen. So if you have a converter pen, the one I'm holding is not a converter pen, but if you have a converter pen, you can take the converter off. Here's a converter. You can take the converter off your pen, and you can go, and that opening is right down in there. You can get right down in the corner of that bottle, and you can suck up pretty much every last drop of ink out of that bottle, assuming that your bottle is like deep enough where you can actually get your fingers in there. That's where an ink syringe really helps. But that's the concept. The only drawback to doing it that way is that when you're filling directly from the bottle with the nib, you're kind of priming the nib and the feed with ink as you're drawing it in. So you're going to get a little more ink capacity if you're drawing it through the nib and feed. And it's also primed and ready to go. If you're just filling the converter, same thing as kind of when you have a cartridge and you install it for the first time, you're going to have to kind of force a little bit of ink down through the feed, probably about a quarter of it or so, to kind of force it down in there to get that feed primed up. And then you're going to lose a little bit of your ink capacity. But if you're in a refilling situation, like you've used an ink and you're going to use the same ink and refill it, you're not going to clean the whole pen out, then that's not an issue because your feed's already primed. So that's where it's easier. But if it's that first time and you're doing this method you're talking about, that's the only thing you kind of want to watch out for. So other than that, knock yourself out, man. All right. Matthew M. on Facebook. I'm choosing between a Lamy 2000 and a 14 karat Lamy Studio Wild Rubin. I know they have different fill mechanisms, true, but as far as writing, will they be similar? Yes, so the Lamy 2000 is a piston filler with a hooded nib, and the 14 karat Lamy Studio is a cartridge converter, and it has the 14 karat gold Lamy nib. Now, the Lamy 2000 nib is also 14 karat, so it's kind of confusing because they're both 14 karat gold nibs, but they are very different nibs. Different shapes, different grinds, they feel very different. So it is going to be a very different writing experience. The end result, the line variation, is not different between the two really, except when you get to the broad. The broad nib on the 14K Studio is very, very wet. Very wet, like super crazy fire hose gushing, open up the fire hydrant kind of wet. It's insane. And you can tell, just look at the nib nook, look at the sample between the broad, Lamy Studio 14K and the broad Lamy 2000. It's ridiculous. It's that drastic. But everything else, the extra fine, fine, and medium, are all really pretty much in line with each other. So as far as the end result of the line that you're going to get, they're going to be pretty identical. The feel of the nib is going to be a little different though. The Lamy 2000 really doesn't have a lot of spring to it. It's a fairly stiff nib. Part of that is just it's a very small nib, and I have a video on removing the nib on a Lamy 2000. If you pull the thing out of there, you'll see it's really not that long. Like, you see how much of it kind of pokes out at the end of that pen because it's a hooded nib. There's not that much more that's under there. So there's just not a lot of material there to give you spring. The regular Lamy nib, even though it also is not all that long, it's still longer, so it's going to be a little bit softer. It's going to feel a little bit springier. It's not going to give you more flex or spring or line variation, but it is going to feel a little bit different. It's also a little more forgiving. The Lamy 2000 is kind of known, it's got a reputation for having kind of a sweet spot, and that's definitely the case. For whatever reason, the way they grind those things, it's not as forgiving in rotating side to side. It's definitely something you get used to fairly quickly, but if you are looking to, if this is going to be kind of your first 14 karat nib, you know, it might be worth considering the Studio. However, if you remember what I just talked about a couple minutes ago in the celluloid conversation, I'm not personally as big of a fan of the grip of the Studio as I am with the Lamy 2000. The Lamy 2000 grip is definitely grippier than the slick metal on the Studio. So you got to think about how you're going to be using this pen, whether you are concerned with the way that grips or not. Me, I just have naturally very oily hands, so it exacerbates that problem when I have the metal grip. Other people, it's not an issue nearly as much. So for me, it is definitely an issue. So personally, I like the Lamy 2000 as a pen. I actually like the feel of the 14K Studio nib a little bit better. So it's kind of a toss-up. But the convenience of the Lamy 2000 really kind of ends up winning out for me. And I just like that it's a little more durable and things like that. So I personally keep my Studios. I use them a little less often, keep them more as a desk pen. My Lamy 2000 is like my, you know, it's not a cheap pen, but it's kind of more of an everyday pen for me that I kind of carry around, and I don't necessarily feel I have to have it like in a pen sleeve or something if I'm carrying it. I just kind of keep it tucked into my Midori Traveler's notebook, you know, and have it in the pen loop there. And then it just gets banged around. If it gets scratched up a little bit, it's not a big deal, you know, because the thing's like fiberglass and all that. So it's very durable material. So I hope that helps you out. Matthew M. No, I just answered. Sorry, Matthew. I was about to read the same question again. Okay. Marcus P. on Facebook. I have no idea how it happened, but there's a tiny amount of ink trapped above the piston in my converter of my Lamy Z24. Is this a common occurrence, and how does someone deal with this issue when it happens? I can't find an easy way to disassemble this particular converter, but maybe I'm not using enough force. Well, Marcus, there is a way to do it. I'm actually embarrassed because I meant to shoot a video on this 4.5 years ago, and I just never did. So it's, I don't even know if I have a Lamy converter right here. I should have grabbed one before I shot the video. Okay, well, I don't have a Lamy converter like right at the ready. But basically, it's not that different of a setup than a regular standard international. It's got a metal collar here that holds kind of the whole piston mechanism onto the body of the converter. You got to slide that sucker off there, and you really got to get a good grip on it. You know, get something like a Goulet grip. You know, shameless plug. Or get a rubber band or some kind of grippy material like you use to line your drawer cabinets or whatever thing gives you grip, a rubber bike tire, garden hose, whatever it might be. Something to give you grip on here, and just slide that collar off, and then you'll be able to pull all the guts out of there, clean up the ink from behind there, reassemble the whole thing, and then you're good to go. If you got a little silicone grease while you have the thing apart, throw a little grease on that seal, that piston seal, while you have it out, and not much, but just a tiny bit. And then when you put it back in, the thing's going to move like it never has before. So it's really a relatively easy thing. I've been meaning to do a video on it forever. I probably just need to do it one of these days. But however, I'll give a shout out to my boy Stephen Brown. He's got a video on it that I'm going to link up in the blog. But I think it's a video on actually disassembly, or he calls it the disassembly line of the Lamy Safari. So go check that video out from him. He's done a great job with that. Beat me to the punch unnecessarily because I should have done this video a while ago. But he's got a video on it already that you can check out, and he does a good job with that. So, all right, Dwelyn D on Facebook. Holy moly! I got your pen tuning kit in the mail today and worked with the Mylar paper on the nibs. I don't know if it's a placebo effect, but the nib writes so smoothly. I wanted to ask another question. Is it normal to experience minor feedback after nib smoothing, particularly with the Mylar paper? Also, how would you define a glass smooth nib? I mean, I need your insight, and depending on what you guys say, I might continue smoothing this nib or just stop at this sweet spot. That's a good question, okay? And you are getting into like the Bermuda Triangle of nib smoothing here, okay? Because what happens is when you start smoothing your nib, you start to notice a difference and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so much smoother. I wonder how much smoother I can make it, you know? And so you get into this kind of loop where it's like, oh, you end up smoothing and smoothing and smoothing, trying to get it to like this utopian smoothness, right? And it's possible to overdo it. With Mylar paper, it's kind of tough to overdo it because it's not that aggressive of a paper. Usually it's more of an issue with micromesh, which is more of an abrasive than Mylar paper is. With micromesh, it gets to the point where you can smooth it so much that you actually flatten out the nib, and then you can start to actually make it worse. Within, you know, not that long a period of time, a minute or two, it can really happen quickly. So you got to be careful when you're doing the micromesh. So I have a video on using micromesh. I have a video on using Mylar paper to smooth your nibs. There's a lot of different methods out there. My method is a little bit different than what Richard Binder teaches. I did take his nib smoothing class back in August at the DC Pen Show. Similar kind of concept. He's got a different method. He's definitely smoothed a lot more than I have, so I'm like, well, my method is probably not as tried and proven as his. However, I've had good experiences with doing mine, and if you're careful with it, you know, you definitely, it's still kind of hard to really overdo it, unless you're just really kind of going nuts. So light touch, you know, and then you're kind of going to have to like keep yourself in check. Like when it comes to smoothing these nibs, you gotta decide at what point is it you're just not making it any better. You know, if you're not making it any better and you feel like it might even be getting worse, kind of stop, because you might actually be making it worse. And you know, you're never going to be able to get it to be 100% smooth, you know, because you're dealing with friction. You're dealing with paper, which might look and feel smooth, but at the kind of molecular level or whatever, it's actually a fairly rough surface. And these nibs, you know, they're metal, so they're going to create friction and they're going to wear down over time eventually. So, you know, the most important thing before you get to the point where you're using Mylar or micromesh or whatever is that you're checking those tines. You know, having something like a loop will help a great deal, but making sure that those tines are aligned and writing properly before you start smoothing. Because what happens is if your tines are not aligned, if you got one tine that's a little bit lower than the other, it might feel kind of rough and scratchy. So what happens is you start smoothing it like crazy and you smooth out that rough spot there, but then you end up with one of the tines that is not the same size as the other. You know, the tip of the tines is not the same size as the other, and it can throw off the alignment. It can cause you flow issues because there needs to be a little bit of a kind of a concave situation going on at the bottom. So ink flows through capillary action. It flows down that feed. It's got a very narrow channel, so it's flowing down that feed. It's mating up to the back of that surface of the nib, comes up through the slit of the nib, and goes to the ball, the tip at the end. And that tip has to have a little bit of an opening down at the bottom. You know, ideally you want it to be where there's just a little tiny bit of a gap, tiny bit of a gap right at the end of the tip, or maybe if nothing else, maybe a little bit kind of touching at the top with a little bit of an opening at the bottom to encourage that flow to come down to the point that's actually touching the paper. And what happens is if you are smoothing it out too much, you're going to smooth away that gap, and it's going to kind of cause a break in the flow of ink, and you're going to start to have skipping and starting issues and stuff like that. Again, with Mylar, it's kind of tough to do that, but it is going to come to a point where it's really just not going to get much smoother because that's as smooth as it can get. So I hope that helps you out there. But good job on smoothing out your own nib. That's nice. If you want to practice more, you know, I recommend getting something with a number 6 size, like a Noodler's pen or whatever, and getting the Noodler's nibs, because they are like $2 a piece. You're just not going to get nibs cheaper than that to test out with smoothing and stuff like that. Nice little way to try it out. All right, Ben C. on Facebook. I'm really curious to find out when you'll start carrying the Knock company products. I realize that I could buy them direct now, but I'd rather support 2 businesses with my money rather than just one. So any tentative dates? Can't wait to see the Q&A. Right on. Thanks, Ben. Well, that's really cool of you. You know, I've talked about Knock a couple of weeks ago. Somebody was asking about it, and I showed kind of some of the sample products that I have. You know, Knock is kind of started by Brad Dowdy and a couple of his buddies, and it's a product I'm really excited about. You know, and they're like nylon pen cases that are really nice and very reasonably priced, very colorful and very practical. You know, you can tell that they were designed by a pen enthusiast, you know, just because of their functionality. And Brad's done a fantastic job with those. In fact, I think that's part of the problem is he's done such a good job with that he's like can't keep up with the production. I think he's doing a good job keeping up with his production. I've touched base with him a couple of times, not like super keeping tabs on him, but I know he's been selling direct, and he's trying to build up an inventory in addition to what he's selling, so that when he starts offering to retailers like me, that he has a stock to be able to pull from and doesn't run into a situation where it's like, oh, we release this thing and then the supply dries up and we don't get any more stock for 3 months. You know, that's what we're trying to avoid. So thank you, Brad, for taking that approach about it. That's actually a very intelligent decision on your part. You know, and so I think he's anticipating the demand is going to be really high for these things, and that's what I have been relaying to him too. And so it's the kind of thing that I don't know exactly at this point. I think he was launching in the summer. He was intending kind of end of summer, early fall to have them available to retailers. Here we are now in November. Still doesn't have a firm date yet. So I respect the fact that he wants to wait until he's ready. I know he's taking steps to increase his production and stuff like that. However, you know, I'm left kind of sitting waiting here, not having good information for you. So the thing that I would say about it is, if you're really interested in this, especially if it's something you're trying to get for the holidays, go ahead and buy it from Knock. You know, obviously I would love to have them and have your business, your support, and you know, here I am sitting here talking about Knock, and I can't even, you know, for right now I can't even benefit from it at all, you know, from a financial standpoint, I guess, from a strictly business sense. You know, but I'm trying to have goodwill here. So, you know, definitely support Knock. I want Knock to be successful and to be around for a while. I think Brad and the other guys there are going to help to come up with some cool products in the future. I want to be involved and collaborate on that stuff, which is why I'm just going to be patient. I'm not going to push it. You know, whenever they're ready, you know, I'll be all over it. So, at this point, it's unclear whether we're even going to see any of the products before 2015 rolls around, but you can be assured that as soon as they come available, I'll be all over top of those things. So thanks for bringing that up. All right, Pastor Chuck S. on Facebook. I would love to hear your thoughts on business calendars or planners that are fountain pen friendly. I can live with ghosting, but the bleed through is a real problem. Yes, okay, so I'll just kind of layer this whole conversation with the fact that I'm really not a planner expert. You know, there are tons of planner options out there. Some are fountain pen friendly, many are not. And that has just not been my personal area of expertise. You know, there are other retailers out there who focus a lot more on planners and paper and stuff like that. You know, Writer's Block is one that I can think of, that they deal a lot more in that type of stuff. So some of the ones that I had the most experience with are the Rodeo Weekly Planner, and then Midori has a couple of different planners. And their paper is all pretty decent. Now, the thing I will say about most planners, usually the paper in those planners is, even from the same brand, is going to be different than it is in a bound notebook or stationery or something like that. And I think that's by design. Usually when you're talking about planners, you're talking about quick notes. You want the ink to dry quickly so that you can just close it up and move on and not have to worry about imprinting onto the other side of the page. So it's kind of a cat and mouse game a little bit between wanting it to dry quickly, which means it has to absorb into the paper so that it doesn't imprint onto the other side when you close it. And then also the other side of that is, if it absorbs in too much to the paper, it can absorb through the paper and come out the other side, which kind of defeats the purpose in the first place of not having imprints on the other side. Now it's just bleeding through to the back. So, and that kind of is a stinky situation. So it's kind of a fine balance thing. And so that's why it can be kind of tough to find like the perfect planner, because there's so many factors involved. Not only does the layout, the format of the whole thing, and then the layout and all that stuff, but then the paper quality and your own use of it has to all kind of match up. So finding the perfect type of planner can be a bit maddening. But once you find kind of that perfect planner, you want to get it like forever, right? So I know Quo Vadis has a huge range of planners. We are a Quo Vadis dealer, but we don't special order planners much just because we don't know much about them. It is not our area of expertise. So we really kind of shy away from them. But you can check out quovadisplanners.com. They got tons of stuff there, and they got retailers that you can kind of find through there. And then Filofax, I think, has a bunch too. Filofax has a whole following of planners and all kinds of different organizational kind of carry things, a lot of businessy things too. So that's another great brand to look into as well. So and then just some kind of pointers about when you're using your fountain pens in these planners. Try to stick to the finest nibs possible, things that are not going to put down a lot of ink. And then you don't want to use like a flex pen or something like that, just a super wet thing. And then you want to use an ink that's going to perform really well on this paper. So, Noodler's X Feather, Heart of Darkness, things like that, they're going to perform pretty well on these slightly more absorbent papers. All right, Linda T on Facebook. Christmas card season approaches. Inks that contain a metallic fleck, iridescence, shimmer, or shine. Silver, not just gray. Gold, not just yellow. Red and green. Okay, so I think there's a question in there, sort of, that I'm going to derive. I'm going to extract the question out of your statement there, Linda. So I get asked about metallic inks from time to time. A lot of people are asking about, white inks, like pure white inks, silver, gold, metallic kind of things. They really don't exist in the fountain pen world, and that's a physical, chemical thing. We live in a physical world, and it's just a limitation of physics. In order to get those heavy metallic, kind of looks and things like, those whites and other colors, you have to use pigments instead of dye. Now, dye is a liquid and pigment is a solid. So there are some really, really fine pigments that you can get with pigmented inks. It's kind of a blend of dyes and pigments, like platinum carbon black and the Sailor, Kiwaguro and stuff like that. Those have pigments in the ink. They're a little higher maintenance, but you can do it. There's nothing like that out there for silver or gold or anything like that. Now, the one thing that there has come out recently that's kind of been driving everybody crazy is the Jeroboam 1670 Stormy Gray, because it is a gray ink that has a gold shimmer to it. It's definitely not a gold ink, but it has a gold kind of fleck in the gray, which is really kind of the first of its kind that I've ever seen. You have the Jeroboam Rouge Hematite, which is red with kind of a gold fleck, which that would probably be a really good color for a Christmas red. Actually, I didn't even have that on my list. Why didn't I have that on my list? Okay, I gotta put that on there. But Rouge Hematite would definitely be one. For other reds, let's see here. Diamond Matador, before I get into other colors. Okay, so you got Rouge Hematite and Stormy Gray. Those are kind of some of the fleckiest, gold or red kind of colors that you can get. But even still, they're not going to be like you would think, just from kind of the way you're asking me here. So I guess it would be more of a shimmer than anything, but it's not going to be a metallic fleck kind of thing. So if you want to get that kind of true, like, bam, in your face, kind of silver gold, whatever, you really need to go with more of a true calligraphy, a dip pen ink. That's where you can really get those bold, bright colors, those shimmers, because you're dealing with pigments and metallic, flakes and stuff like that in the ink, because it's not having to flow through a fountain pen feed. That's the main problem. The flecks and stuff that you need to get those shimmers that you get for those things, they will not flow through a fountain pen. They'll clog it up. So that's the problem. Now, that said, another ink that I love that has a really good shimmer to it is Diamond Majestic Blue. It's a dark blue ink with kind of a red, like kind of purple shimmer to it. It's really not that much of a Christmassy kind of color, but it might work for you. I just love that ink personally. So just having said that about the pigments and all that stuff, what I can give you feedback on is what are some good Christmas reds and greens to go with. So reds, top pick would definitely be Rouge Hematite. Diamond Matador or Diamond Red Dragon, just some pure like solid reds. Love those. Noodler's Nikita, it's a nice bright red. Schaefer Red, very pure red, and Diamond Poppy Red. So those are some of the kind of the reds that I have that are like that nice, bright, cheery kind of Christmassy reds. Then as far as green goes, you want something kind of vibrant. Noodler's Green Cactus or Green Cactus Eel. That's the lubricated version of green cactus. So definitely those two. The Carandash Vibrant Green is very punchy as well. Private Reserve Spearmint, that's a really good Christmas green. Then I put, Diamine Evergreen in there. That's a little darker, but it's got more kind of a Christmas tree kind of color to it. So, and it's got a little bit of red in there. So it's a green with a little bit of a hint of red. So just kind of an interesting little Christmas ink there. So hopefully that helps you out. Gives you something to go off of. All right, talking about 1670, Eric O says, Jeroboam Stormy Gray. The hard part is finding some. Brian, when's the next shipment? With 6 question marks. So I answer and say, tell me about it, with 6 exclamation marks. So yeah, this ink came and gone. Boom. It was gone in an hour, I think. I think we had an hour. We did have the insight to save a bunch for samples. Now, I know what you're thinking, or you might be thinking, and we always run into this when we get into limited inks. So we sell bottles and we sell samples. And we knew ahead of time that we were not going to get enough of this ink, and we knew that we were going to be in a situation where we were going to have to wait for another shipment. We didn't realize it was going to be until December. We found that out like a week after we ran out of the ink. But we knew we were going to be waiting for it, so we strategically decided to purposefully withhold some perfectly good bottles so that we could sample them up. The logic being, please don't, string me up on this one, but the logic was I wanted to allow more people to try the ink by allowing it in a sample than allowing fewer people to have a whole bottle of it and then having all these people over here that were upset because they couldn't find it anywhere. And that's the situation we're in now. You can't find this ink anywhere. Like, everybody's out. And I'm very glad at this point that we held back the bottles that we did for samples, because people are at least getting to try the ink for themselves, because everybody's going out there and they're posting stuff on Instagram and they're posting all these incredible things that you can do with this ink. And while it's maddening that you can't get a full bottle of it anywhere, it's at least you can get a sample of it. So I think we'll have samples for a little while. Of course, it's impossible to predict, especially given that nobody has these bottles right now. But that's why we chose to do it that way. I realize that you could be upset about not being able to get a bottle, but statistically, you're much better chance of being able to at least get a sample of it than you would have had being able to get the bottle. Because if we had put those bottles in stock, it might have lasted 10 more minutes, at that time that we released it, and a few people would have gotten bottles, but now a lot more people get to have samples. So it's kind of like for the greater good kind of thing. So whether or not that's a smart decision, I have my feelings about it, but you probably have your feelings too. That's just kind of one of the logistical, kind of behind the scenes decisions that is always really kind of tough. There really is just no good way to do it. It's the same kind of thing with the Noodler's Neponset. It's like there just aren't enough pens. There's more people that want them than we can get them. What are we going to do? We have to kind of make the best of the situation that we have there. So there's your answer, Eric. We're told early December right now. I don't know how many bottles we're going to get. I know that we have one of the most epic email notification waitlists that we've ever had for an ink. So pretty much whatever amount that we get in is going to be gone immediately again. So I don't know. We might be in a situation where we do need to do another timed release again for that. I could see that happening. It really just depends. Oh, it's going to be right before the holidays too. Oh my gosh. Anyway, it's going to be nuts. It kills me because I know how bad everybody wants it, and I wish I could get it. I really do. It's just I hope the proper emotions coming out. I'm just really torn about this because I'm an enthusiast just like you, and it's oh man, I would really love to have enough for everybody, but unfortunately, the fountain pen world is still kind of small sometimes, and supply is what limits things more than anything else. So hopefully that gives you a little insight into what goes on here anyway. Patrick D on Facebook. Do you know of any pens that come from the factory with oblique nibs? Does Goulet offer or custom order any? Very few. Obliques are not that popular these days. Mostly they come on some high-end pens, and more of the ones that I'm aware that are oblique come from nib grinders, Nibmeisters. That's kind of usually the route you most often need to end up going because they just aren't that available. So I got a couple. I think that some of the Pelikan Souvron pens, like the M400 on up, will have oblique options. I don't know for how long, because I know they're not that popular, and I think right now even they might just be by special order. We don't do a lot with those higher end pelicans. So is M600 right here. And so that it might be the kind of thing where you would need to ask, if you're interested, but they're expensive pens, and if you're buying a $500-600 pen just to get an oblique nib, you're going to be better off buying something like a Vanishing Point or a Lamy 2000 or something like that and having it custom ground if just getting an oblique nib is your end goal. Let's see here. So Pelican's got some. Omas has some as well by special order. We just launched the Ogiva Alba, and we do not have an oblique option available like shipping from our site. It is something we can special order though. I believe we can get an oblique medium and an oblique broad. I don't know about oblique double broad. I will have to see about that. But that's something I'll have to kind of inquire about. Right now I'm getting some clarification on what are some of these special order nibs that are available on this pen. But even still, that's a $500 pen. So it's there's no premium that you pay for swapping out a different nib on that for a special order, but you might have to wait a couple extra weeks to do it. And again, it's the same kind of thing. Like if you're just trying out an oblique nib, that's an expensive pen just to try it out. And then the Lamy 2000 I've been asked about because there is a Lamy 2000 with an oblique nib. I actually have an oblique medium Lamy 2000. It's really not that different. I really can't tell much of the difference between an oblique medium Lamy 2000 and just a regular medium Lamy 2000. It's not that drastic. And most of the obliques that I've used, just maybe it's me, the way I hold my pens or whatever, I really can't tell that much of a difference. So it's kind of thing like I wouldn't really go to too extensive lengths to try to get it. I think there's a reason they're not that widely available. They're kind of being phased out is because most people don't really need them that much or would be able to benefit. It's the kind of thing like for me, I imagine where you're coming from with this question is you hear about obliques and you're like, oh, that'd be really cool to try. I'd love to try one. How do I do that? Well, you got to buy a $500 pen, basically, or get it custom ground. And even then, if you don't, it's the kind of thing like if you don't have that specific way that you're holding it where it really benefits you, it's not going to matter that much anyway. So, that's kind of where I stand with it. I haven't had like a pressing kind of like need to get into obliques personally, and the ones that I have used haven't been like life-changing for me. Now it could be different for somebody else that has a different writing style, but that's just me. Specifically about the Lamy 2000 oblique, we do not have them available in the US, and we cannot even special order them. So we get asked about that from time to time, and we cannot do it. So just so you're aware of that. It is something that I think is somewhat more regularly available in Europe, so you would have to buy from a European retailer in order to get that. All right, Noah L. on Facebook. After a year of Edison Nouveau Premier special editions, how is it going? I think you mean the seasonal editions. We've done some special editions before, so I'm providing some clarification to your question, Noah, because I think what you're asking about is the seasonal ones. So we have had some special edition ones where we've done them like year to year, kind of like an ebonite pen or some fancy acrylic or something like that. But the premiere that you're asking about, the seasonal ones. So we did Black Ice for winter last year. We did Cherry Blossom for this spring. We did Caribbean for this summer, and then Caribbean Sea, and then we did Autumn Harvest for this fall. So we've had 4 different ones, and you're asking me, which of the ENP SE of 2014 was the best seller, and what can we expect for 2015? Any hints or teasers for the future? Well, I'm not going to give you any hints or teasers because that's not how this works. You gotta wait. You gotta chill, and I'm gonna let anticipation build. What I will say is that as far as popularity goes, it was kind of a new concept when we introduced it with the first one. It took a little bit to get up steam, so definitely was a kind of thing like even within Black Ice, that first one we came out with, it actually got more popular as the period was kind of ending for that pen. And then we kind of stocked up a lot right at the end because we expected the demand to be really high. And then once the next one came out, the Black Ice really dropped off a lot, and the Cherry Blossom started off better than the Black Ice. So it's always kind of a guessing game for us, especially because you know, we have to coordinate with Brian Gray over at Edison about how much material he needs to buy. So he's got to buy the material, you know, months in advance to get it sometimes, and then make it, and then we get it, and then we sell it. So there is kind of a bit of a fortune-telling aspect to all this. So, you know, we've had a bit of a stagger step with some of these pens where it'll come out and we're like, oh my gosh, this is actually really popular. Brian, we need more pens. And he's like, oh, I'm gone for this pen show, so I can't get them for a week or two. We're like, shoot, okay. So then we're out. But, you know, we also don't want to go buying, you know, tons and tons and tons of pens and be sitting on them for a year, because that is also not very smart from a business standpoint, and it's not very, you know, great for you, who's thinking like, okay, why did I buy this pen during the, you know, seasonal period when it's still available 8 months later? So it's kind of thing like we try to keep it really kind of in, you know, intelligent, and try to keep it kind of in tune, in line, whatever, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but, you know, try to be very like real time with these pens. But it's to the point now where I think the Autumn Harvest, that material that he's using for Autumn Harvest, I think we're actually going to use it all up. We just barely made it by with Caribbean Sea. Oh, sorry, I didn't actually answer your question. So, yes, which has been the most popular? Autumn Harvest has been the most popular, you know, pretty significantly. And then before that, the most popular was Caribbean Sea. Before that, the most popular was Cherry Blossom. And before that was the first pen. So every pen that's come out has been more popular. Part of that, I think, is because the concept is kind of catching on, you know, and people are getting excited and they're understanding like, oh wow, they're really not going to make this pen after 3 months and it's going to be gone. So if I really like this color, I need to reprioritize and make sure that I get this, because it will not be available anymore after the period's over. With Caribbean Sea, we barely made it to the finish. Like, I think we actually ran out of pens like a day or two before the next one came out, or maybe it was a very, very close overlap. And that was because we actually ran out of material. So we barely made it with that one. And Autumn Harvest at this point, we still have almost a month to go on that one, and I think we're going to run out of material towards the end of the month. So, and that's because there just is no more material. We literally bought all of the stock of that particular color, that particular acrylic, from, you know, from Brian Gray's supplier. So that is kind of all there's going to be. And you know, we already have our color picked for winter, so we're going to be coming out with the winter one just a little bit early, you know, kind of right at the start of December, maybe just after Thanksgiving. But that one, I know we actually have less of that acrylic available than we did the Autumn Harvest. So I'm actually kind of hoping that the winter one won't be quite as popular as Autumn Harvest, because then we'll have kind of a gap where the material just won't be available, and that would really be kind of weird. But, you know, we'll see. We'll have to come up with kind of an alternate plan if that is the case. So we're kind of taking this thing a little bit at a time. That's the only one we have planned out so far is winter, though. We don't have spring planned out. We're still kind of working through that. That's part of the fun of it, is we like to be a little bit spur of the moment and kind of work that stuff out. So there you go. And I'm reaching the end of my time here, so I'll go ahead and wrap up. I do have a question of the week for this week, and that question is, what's the one video that you're most dying for me to make? What's the one thing that you would really love to see me do that I've put off forever, or that you really just have questions about, or you really would just like to see done? I would like to know. Not that I really need ideas, because I already have so many videos I haven't been able to put out, but I'm just really curious to know from you, what do you really, really, really want to see me do? That would be really cool for me to know. And maybe it is in alignment with something that I've always really wanted to do too, and I can just boom, pound it out, make it happen. Who knows? So that would be really cool. Post that in the comments on YouTube or on the blog. Hit me up on Twitter at @BrianGoulet_. That'd be great. So if you got any questions for next week, hit me up in the comments or answer on Facebook when we pose a question next week. I will be back next week with another open forum. I hope you enjoyed the questions this week. I didn't even get through all the ones I had planned because I'm running out of battery time. I'm really running my mouth a lot these days, but thank you so much for spending time with me. I appreciate it very much. Appreciate all the questions. You have a wonderful weekend. Run for the rest of your week, and right on.